Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to be responding to Joe Rogan and Richard Dawkins talking about how Islam and religion is dying and atheism is taking over the world.
Is there any evidence that that is reaching the Muslim world as well, and that people are?
Well, as I was saying, the downloads of my books have been encouraging. We have this thing called CFI has a thing called the Translation Project.
So in this clip, Dawkins says religion's dying as a general point. Would you agree with that?
Well, first of all, we'd have to be very clear about how we define religion. Okay, in terms of atheism actually becoming more popular, or the kind of atheism which Richard Dawkins himself espouses. As I mentioned in my book, which is free to download, the book is called The Scientific Deception of the New Atheists.
That's a very subtle plug-in.
Yes, you can put it. You can see it in the description box. But I've referenced in that book. It's a very small, very small booklet, really, that you can download free of charge. All of the demographic data indicates that most people in the West, according to Pew Research, 90% of people still believe in a higher power. According to Linda Woodhead, only 5.5% of people believe in the strident atheism that Richard Dawkins believes in. Which is actually, quite interestingly, from a British perspective, the same number of people, amount of people that are Muslim in this country. So there's about the same amount of Muslims in this country as there are atheists.
Militant atheists.
Strident atheists of Richard Dawkins' kind.
So here Dawkins, he's basically saying, look, guys, I can tell you atheism's rising in the Muslim world and Islam is dying because people are downloading my book. It's a really rigorous scientific argument, isn't it?
Well, it's methodologically flawed from a demographic and sociological perspective, not least because the religious switching cannot and has not been sociologically identified by downloads of the atheistic
Well, we
material.
can say after 9/11, millions of people say they downloaded the Quran because they're like, okay, what's this about?
Yeah.
Does that mean they automatically became Muslim?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Right.
it's a very
I mean,
silly
first of
argument.
all, 13 million people might have downloaded the book, but it doesn't mean all of them, number one, read it, and number two, agreed with it.
Or it could be a vaccination.
Right.
Because the book has such weak arguments. Like Michael Roos says, I'm embarrassed to be an atheist because of this book, right?
Yeah,
this
yes.
book makes me embarrassed. And, he makes the conflation between metaphysical naturalism and methodological naturalism. There's fallacies pointed out
Yes.
by Elliot Sober, by Massimo Piglucci,
Yes.
by Michael Roos, by all these people.
Right.
So it could be the Muslim picks up the book and is like, okay, this is atheism is about. Actually, it's quite poor. And then they're like, I'll never want to touch atheism again. Maybe he's spreading Islamism in the Muslim world.
Absolutely, because a lot of the time when people want to increase their cultural capital by learning about new ideas of the West, which is obviously the demographic heartland of the new atheist movement, that sometimes acts as a counter current.
Yeah,
People think, well, if this is what it's about, then we have nothing to do with it.
absolutely.
But in terms of recent history, I mean, what we should look at is the fact that in the 60s and 70s, in countries like the countries that he mentioned, Iran and Egypt, the countries that he mentions, in countries like those, you'll find that there's been a movement from pan-Arabism or nationalism and secularism towards Islam, religiosity, practicing observance of the religion.
Yeah.
And that's visible. I mean, for anyone who just sees pictures, okay, I'm not saying that's the only...
Well, Yemen, Afghanistan,
Yeah.
all these areas, they were secular and communist.
In
and
terms of
atheistic.
even dress code, I mean,
Yeah.
the dress code has shifted completely. Look at pictures of Egypt in the 60s and 70s. Look at pictures of Iran in the 60s. Women were probably wearing miniskirts and these kind of things. Now, there's a big chunk of the population
Yeah.
in Egypt where it's not compulsory. I mean, no one's going to get attacked if they don't, that observe the hijab, that masajid mosques have increased. I mean, even from an internet data point perspective, we look at Google Trends, we look at the du'at, all those individuals who call to Islam, and their sermons and their preaching has become extremely popular, especially in the after 2000. So all the data points that we can look at and tangibly see indicate there's been a trajectory move towards religiosity rather than the opposite.
So he says he's very hopeful, right? He's very hopeful of atheism basically taking over. But I have this question, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but atheists in general, they don't really have many kids. Muslims have a lot of kids. And Dawkins' entire worldview is based upon Darwinism, and the ultimate rationale, according to him in The Selfish Gene, is the preservation of our genes, reproduction, and survival. So, could it be that natural selection, Darwinism, actually causes Islamism? Because Muslims actually have the most amount of children, as you know, and Islam is growing faster than the world population. It's the fastest growing demographic. So, is it possible that that's why Islam is growing, and that's why his hope that atheism is going to actually prevail is going to fail because of the theory that he purports to believe in?
I'll leave that to you, because I think you're the expert on issues to do with Darwinism. But what I think is that Richard Dawkins has delusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
In one of his interviews with The Sun, he was asked, "Do you think you're winning?" or something to that effect, and he said, "Yes, we're winning." Nothing of the information that we have from Pew Research on apostasy, which by the way is methodologically flawed, because they interview like 30% or Iranians who don't speak English as a first language and don't represent the bulk of Muslims in America. But even if we look at that and we look at other data points like the Yaqeen study on doubt and so on, we'll find that really Darwinian arguments, which is really the thrust of his book, right? As being Darwinian, the Darwinian mechanism replaces the God thesis. Really, that's what he's trying to argue.
Yeah.
Is not one of the reasons why people are leaving religion, if it is a reason, if there is a reason.
I think in your research you were trying to, in your book, you're basically talking about moral issues.
Yes.
Yeah, that being the cause, not anything
exactly. So in terms of if there's an intellectual reason, which is not always the case for people leaving Islam, for example, or even Christianity, in the case of Islam, it's usually morality.
Yeah.
Which is not the exclusive property of the new atheist argument.
Well, actually, they don't have a justification for morality in the first place.
Exactly right.
And that's something else.
In the sense that they make these arguments against religion, but so do other people, many different people who are not new atheists. Christians can make arguments against Islamic morality. Liberal secularists can make arguments against. So we wouldn't be able to pinpoint whether their arguments for Islam using morality is the exact or the reason for the switching.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, there is that. And you can also sort of argue that, he's talking about atheism taking off in the Muslim world, but has it even really taken off in the Western world? Because the Soviet Union, they had this massive atheism project for decades. And when it collapsed, people went back to religion. We're finding New Age paganism. We're finding these spiritual movements rising all across Europe, rising all across North America. So it's not even working here. Why would it be working in the Muslim world?
Well, looking at new atheism in particular, people like Richard Dawkins, people like Sam Harris. And when we look at the interaction or the engagement or the numbers, because Joe Rogan used that term, the metrics, the actual internet metrics with... for example, 10 years ago, 15 years ago to now, you'll realize that actually people are losing interest in their arguments. It's like old arguments that are being regurgitated.
They actually turn to Jordan Peterson and
the
meaning of life and nihilism and
these people are irrelevant.
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Dawkins is a 78-year-old man who now has produced a book called
Is this your new target now?
No, he's not. He's not a target, because really and truly, he's an irrelevant person. I mean, we have to be honest. 78 years old, has just produced a book. I'm not going to even name the title. And if you compare the hits that he has on that book, and we've used Google Trends to do so, before and after, compared to The God Delusion, you realize that it's not even 1/5 the amount of interest that he got before.
Yeah.
So people are not interested anymore. They've heard what he has to say. Some people were convinced, who probably were agnostic in the first place, but most people are not. And his broken record arguments are just becoming a thing of the past. They're going to go to the dustbin of history, really.
So what about this Joe guy? I mean, he's just nodding along like, one of those puppets. And, he's also been trying to promote atheism a lot. I mean, do you see him as an atheist evangelist as well?
I don't know if he's an evangelist. I actually mentioned Joe Rogan in my book as a point of comparison to show the irrelevance of people like Richard Dawkins.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mentioned him in some of the internet data that I picked up, because he's a cultural figure now. And I think he is an influencer, and I think he is extremely relevant. Like comparing Joe Rogan with Richard Dawkins is like comparing Michael Jackson with, I don't know, one of these people who have started a YouTube channel.
Smile to Jannah or something, right?
Yeah,
something
for example.
Like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But so the point I'm making is that Joe Rogan, though, he's an atheist, and for the most part, he's just brought atheists into his podcast. He's spoken to Sam Harris, spoken to Richard Dawkins. He's engaged with Ben Shapiro, softly on Judaism. He's not really had someone who represents the religion, an Abrahamic religion, talk them through their rationale. Which is why we say it's very important that that he calls someone to his podcast who is a Muslim, and we're always here. Our services are always
Absolutely. So as you heard from Hijab, Faraz Zahabi, we really ask you to make sure you turn up again on the Joe Rogan show.
Yes.
And do a good job of representing Islam.
He did last time.
MashaAllah.